Welcome back, everybody. Now we're going over the firepower implementation use cases, more specifically with an Internet Edge and VPN support, just the Internet Edge, and finishing up with data center, but in all three of these, using our firepower appliances as firewalls to protect these different environments and provide these different services. So let's get to it. The first one again is going to be the Internet Edge with VPN support. So if you ask me, in my mind, I kind of break this off into two different areas of focus. One is going to be what is needed from a VPN perspective. Maybe again, as the book is saying here, the slide is saying our branch offices, some might be small office, home office, or maybe you've even heard of remote office, branch office. You know how this industry is in creating up all these acronyms upon acronyms for us to have to remember. But then the other category or area of focus is going to be for our VPN users, again using the AnyConnect client. And you might remember from our last topic, our last recording, the AnyConnect license options. And with that being said, that one area of focus there, now we can go over to our second area of focus, which is getting into the corporate location. And especially if it's going to be an Internet Edge, in my mind, throughput, redundancy, and security features are going to be of the highest concern, the highest consideration. So that's where they break it up into connectivity and security requirements. So first off, with connectivity, please note our redundant firewalls, our redundant appliances, our redundant connectivity and routing options here, and this is going to be a topic for another time, but the hot standby redundancy or routing protocol, HSRP, between your layer 3 routed devices, not so much a firewall or security conversation, but again, something we can go over at another time. Please note also how we're providing a port channel here between these two firewalls, and even the firewalls are running in or running as an HA pair. And then from there, depending upon the kinds of topology you need, for example, into a DMZ, and then of course into the private side, as the slide is saying, the campus side of the network. But the whole reason why I'm bringing this up is, please note, we're repeating the port channel into the DMZ side or down here into the campus side. And let me pause just for one moment. The reason why you see here a VPC/port channel is if I can throw another one here, VSS, the virtual port channel, VPC, the virtual switching subsystem, those are going to be determined by, am I in a VPC plugging into a Nexus set of switches, or VSS, am I plugging into a Catalyst set of switches? But guys, in both cases, what we're doing is we have ourselves a peer-to-peer-to-peer kind of a connection. No single peer point of failure. While the port channel, a classic port channel, is doing multiple connections to just one switch, and we do have the potential of a single peer point of failure. So just going over a quick review of the different kinds of port channel options that could be available in these three different connection scenarios. Now if we come on back here with our security requirements, once again to me the security requirements are determined by the kind of environment to which we connect. So of course, for our remote locations, our users, and then internet connectivity, we're going to have various kinds of network address translation features. Because of the traffic coming from our users and even coming from the outside into our organization, application inspection is in very, very important demand here. Our ACLs, folks, I'm going to tell you now, in my opinion, every implementation, every use case needs some ACLs because they provide us with a minimum of a very broad blockage of traffic that only what makes it past the access control list will then later be inspected. And as we said earlier, because of the nature of our first kind of connection here, we're going to need VPN support both for site-to-site and our remote access users. So finishing this slide up before we go into the next slide, ultimately what that means is either the ASA or a firepower appliance. Regardless, it's going to be our next-gen firewall that is offering multiple different services inside of one platform for these different kinds of connections. Now let's continue the same, and by the same I mean we're still going to be doing our internet edge, but please note how the VPN options are not going to be covered in this use case. So just like before, we still have our connectivity, we still have our security, and we still have our recommended solution. So let's go over the things that are consistent, that are familiar from the last slide. Starting with, again, HA, our firewalls in an HA mode or as an HA pair, depending upon what book you pick up and how you want to read it. And of course, as the last scenario, in a routed mode, a layer 3 mode, a bump in the stack versus a bump in the wire. And don't worry, these terms of routed mode, transparent mode, bump in the stack, bump in the wire, that's going to be something that we'll go over in more detail in a topic coming up later in this series. What's also important is, please note, from a routing perspective, it really depends upon the kind of environment you're in as to whether or not you can use static or the border gateway protocol, BGP routing mechanisms. For all we know, maybe you want to dynamically exchange routes with your provider, and I promise you, your provider's not going to be using static routes, not for the kind of environment they're in, so you might be exchanging BGP-based routing information. Or again, you might be in an environment, and please be careful here, using dynamic routing protocols versus static route configuration does not mean, oh, I only have one way or I have a whole bunch of ways. No, no, no. It just means, do I want to better control or do I want to dynamically update, dynamically learn? So you might be in an environment where, yeah, I've got two different ways to get out and get in, but I'm treating one way as a primary only and the other way as a secondary only, and I can very much control that with static routes that I manually configure. So please don't think that it's going to be a size of an environment. In my opinion, it's going to be more of a control and learnability determining factor. Regardless, guys, moving on to our next subject, again, we still have our various NAT options, whether it be dynamic NAT for our users trying to get out, and again, our static NAT for the clients on the outside trying to connect into our various servers on the inside. Please forgive me there, I'm not much of an artiste. And then, guys, finishing up with potential authentication requirements. Maybe for all we want, or for all we know, excuse me, we want the ability to authenticate our users before they go out to the web, or even authenticate clients before they come in. So we might have a need for authentication services on these firewalls. And last but not least, especially for the scalability and throughput, the solution that is being recommended here is the next-gen firewall under the Firepower portfolio. All right, let's do this one more time, getting into our use case, which is a data center. So please note what we're doing here is, whereas before on some of the previous use cases, we were going to the campus or to the internal, the private network, as the slide said in the past, now we're going into our data center. And you might remember from the introduction video that I did, a lot of my focus for a good 11, maybe even 12 years now has been on the data center. So when I hear data center, my first thought is going to be high throughput. My other thought is going to be a virtualized data center. There was a report done years ago, forget about what's going on today, but years ago where they mentioned that over 70% of our traffic today is going to be what is referred to as east-west traffic or virtual traffic to virtual traffic. So again, modern day data centers, our whole point in saying that is modern day data centers are heavily, heavily virtualized. So again, one more time, the two things I think of is going to be high throughput and virtualized data centers. Now let's back up a little bit because we still want to provide our highly connected, highly available, highly resilient infrastructure with port channels. One more time, we're doing our isolation between the different areas or zones. So we're going to be running in a routed mode. Again, what kind of routing protocol are we talking about? Folks, I don't want to turn this into a routing overview, but please understand you could also do BGP on the inside. That is absolutely possible. But what the author is just showing here is OSPF is a very, very common, large-scale, advanced, a lot of control mechanisms, interior gateway protocol. So I want to go back to what we said on the previous slide, this is going to be a determining factor of, do I want ultimate control and I want to do everything with static routes, or am I in an environment where I rather learn of the new routing information, dynamically learn, so I want to run a dynamic routing protocol. And then last but not least, you might remember one more time, we're ultimately connecting into the data center. And again, guys, our data center, obviously, with our virtual machines, for example. And what I always tell people is that virtual machines are largely going to be our servers. If you come from a virtual environment, a hypervisor environment, you already know that no, our virtual machines are not only servers, but largely they are our servers. So the whole reason why I'm bringing that up is I definitely want to have greater application visibility and control. I absolutely want to make sure that I do not have malicious connections, malicious activity going to those servers. I want to better understand the application, the data, the event correlation going into my servers. I also, especially today with all these different services that are HTTPS based, SSL TLS based, I'm going to want to be able to decrypt those SSL TLS sessions. And then last but not least, one more time, because this being our data center down here with our servers and services, I want to be able to discover those servers and services and provide network map information. And last but not least, the platform, the solution for this data center use case is again going to be the Firepower Next Generation Firewall. So thank you guys again for listening on our 3 use cases: Internet Edge with VPN, VPN to branch sites, and VPN to, let's say, home users or traveling users, our Internet Edge only, and then finishing up with a data center use case.